Chapter 1. The Unexpected Prey. Zartha was a planet that even the most daring explorers avoided. Its reputation wasn't just that of a death world, it was the death world, the apex of hostile environments. With an atmosphere barely breathable by most sentient species, acidic rain that could corrode even reinforced armor, and predators that rivaled the deadliest war machines in cunning and lethality, it wasn't just a place. It was a test. A test of will, intelligence, and, above all, the ability to survive. It was precisely why Rilnia Khatrin had chosen it as her hunting ground. Rilnia crouched in the thick underbrush, her long, flexible tail curling around her legs for balance. Her obsidian-black scales shimmered faintly in the dappled green light filtering through the jungle canopy. Her eyes, sharp and yellow, scanned the area ahead with a hunter's focus, her enhanced vision picking up every twitch of a leaf, every shadow that might conceal her quarry. She wasn't here to hunt for food or sport. No, this was a sacred rite trial to prove her worth as one of the galaxy's greatest huntresses. The Nazari, her reptilian race, valued strength and cunning above all else. To be declared a master hunter was not just an honor. It was a legacy. It would elevate her bloodline, ensuring her genes were selected for the prestigious genetic enhancements her people offered to only the finest of their kind. And Rilnia intended to win that honor. Her target? The serth beast, an apex predator native to Zartha. Known for its size, speed, and intelligence, the serth was a creature of nightmares. Its thick, spiked hide could repel energy blasts, and its claws could tear through reinforced metal. But what made it truly dangerous was its tactical mind. Was said to study its prey, learn their weaknesses, and strike when they least expected it. Rilnia's lips curled into a predatory grin. The serth would be her ultimate prize. She adjusted the energy spear strapped to her back and tapped the control panel on her wrist. A holographic map of the area flickered to life, showing the heat signatures of nearby creatures. The serth's trail was fresh, a set of massive, clawed footprints leading toward the river basin. She moved silently, her every step calculated, her breathing steady. The jungle was alive with sounds. The screeches of avian creatures, the distant roar of something large and territorial, the constant rustling of leaves in the humid wind. It was exhilarating. But Rilnia wasn't the only hunter in the jungle. Half a mile away, a man crouched beside a stream, his hand cupping water to his lips. He was human, though no one would have mistaken him for an ordinary one. His name was Connor Vance, and he looked utterly out of place on Zartha. Average height, lean but muscular, with tan skin and messy brown hair, he seemed more suited to a survival show on some backwater planet than the deadliest ecosystem in the galaxy. And yet, Connor had survived here for 6 months. His arrival on Zartha hadn't been intentional. A mercenary transport ship he had been traveling on had been shot down by a rogue pirate fleet. He'd been the only survivor of the crash, his escape pod landing in the heart of the jungle. The pirates hadn't bothered pursuing him, they'd assumed he wouldn't last a day. But Connor had proven them wrong. With nothing but his wits, a survival knife, and a malfunctioning plasma pistol, he had defied the odds. He'd learned to navigate the treacherous terrain, scavenge food from the toxic flora, and defend himself against the relentless predators. He had even managed to construct a rudimentary shelter and set traps for some of the smaller creatures. It hadn't been easy. He bore the scars of near-fatal encounters, but he was still standing. Connor finished drinking and stood, his senses sharp. The jungle was never quiet, but he had learned to notice the subtle shifts in its rhythm. Something was off. The distant calls of the avian creatures had grown fainter, and the underbrush seemed unusually still. He reached for his plasma pistol, the weapon buzzing faintly in his hand. Its energy cell was nearly depleted, but it was better than nothing. And then he saw it, a massive figure moving through the trees, nearly 20 feet away. At first, he thought it was another predator, but as it came closer, he realized it wasn't a beast at all. It was Rilnia. Rilnia froze as her heat sensors picked up an unexpected signature. Human. She blinked in disbelief. No human had ever been documented surviving on Zartha for more than a few hours. Yet here was one, standing before her, alive and armed. Her initial reaction was to dismiss him as insignificant. Humans were notoriously weak and ill-adapted to harsh environments. But as she observed him, something about the way he moved caught her attention. His stance was confident, his eyes alert, his weapon ready. He was not afraid. He was assessing her, just as she was assessing him. Interesting. Connor, for his part, had no idea what to make of the towering alien. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her sleek, reptilian form was both intimidating and oddly elegant, and her yellow eyes locked onto his with a focus that sent a shiver down his spine. He tightened his grip on his pistol, his instincts screaming at him to run, but he held his ground. For a moment, neither moved, the jungle around them buzzing with tension. Then Rilnia spoke, her voice low and resonant. "You are human. What are you doing here?" Connor blinked. The question was so unexpected, so straightforward, that he almost laughed. "Surviving," he said simply. Rilnia tilted her head, her gaze narrowing. "Surviving? On Zartha? How?" "Hard work and bad luck," Connor said, his tone dry. "Who are you?" Rilnia straightened, towering over him. "I am Rilnia Katrin, Huntress of the Nazari. This is my trial ground. You are trespassing." Connor raised an eyebrow. "Your trial ground? Lady, I've been here for 6 months. If anyone's trespassing, it's you." Rilnia's tail flicked behind her, a sign of irritation. And yet, she couldn't deny the grudging respect she felt for him. 6 months on Zartha was unheard of for a human or for anyone, for that matter. Most species couldn't last a week. For him to have survived this long meant he was more than just lucky. He was resourceful, intelligent, a survivor, perhaps even a hunter. "What are you hunting?" Connor asked, breaking the silence. Rilnia's eyes gleamed. "The serth beast, the apex predator of this jungle." Connor let out a low whistle. "Good luck with that. I've seen what those things can do." "You've encountered one?" Rilnia's tone sharpened, her interest piqued. "Yeah," Connor said, his expression grim. "And I'd rather not again. One nearly took my arm off 2 months ago." Rilnia studied him, her mind racing. If he had survived an encounter with a serth and lived to tell the tale, he was more than just a survivor. He was a warrior in his own right. And in Nazari culture, a warrior like that deserved recognition. As the jungle shifted around them, an uneasy alliance began to form. Rilnia had come to Zartha to prove her worth as a huntress, but Connor Vance might prove to be the key to her success. And as the Sereth's trail grew closer, Rilnia found herself re-evaluating the human before her. Perhaps he was more than just prey. Chapter 2. The hunt begins. The jungle buzzed with the ambient sounds of life predators lurking, prey scurrying, and the oppressive hum of danger permeating every shadow. Yet, within this cacophony, a tense silence hung between Rilnia Katrin and Connor Vance. They stood like two dueling predators, assessing, measuring, and deciding whether the other could be trusted. Connor broke the silence first, his voice tinged with dry humor. "So, you're hunting a serth beast. Let me guess you're either crazy, suicidal, or trying to impress someone." Rilnia's yellow eyes narrowed, her tail flicking in irritation. "I am none of those things, human. The serth is my trial. A hunt to prove my worth as one of the Nazari's finest warriors." Connor crossed his arms, leaning casually against a nearby tree. "And you came to Zartha alone for this?" "Of course," Rilnia said with a touch of pride. To rely on others in such a trial would diminish its value. Only a hunter who faces the jungle's challenges alone can truly claim victory. Connor gave a low whistle. "That's some serious commitment. But let me tell you something, you don't survive on Zartha by being proud. You survive by being smart. And no offense, but going after a serth by yourself? Not smart." Rilnia's gaze hardened. "You underestimate me, human. The serth may be a formidable opponent, but it will fall like all the others." Connor shook his head, a small grin tugging at his lips. "Look, I'm sure you're tough. I mean, you look like you could throw me across this jungle if you wanted to. But I've seen what that thing can do, and trust me, it doesn't fight fair." Rilnia's interest sharpened. "You faced a serth? Faced it? No. Ran from it?" "Absolutely," Connor admitted. I've seen one tear apart a pack of armored predators like they were nothing. I've studied its behavior, its patterns. It's not just a beast, it's a tactician. And if you're not careful, you'll be its next meal. Rilnia tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. The human had a point. Underestimating the serth would be a fatal mistake. But what surprised her most was his calm demeanor. Most beings would have quaked at the thought of the serth, let alone survived an encounter with one. Yet this human, this unlikely survivor, spoke of it with a mix of caution and respect. Then perhaps you can be of use, Rilnia said, her tone shifting. You've survived here for months. You know the terrain, the creatures. Your knowledge could be valuable. Connor raised an eyebrow. You're asking for my help? I am offering you a chance to prove your worth, Rilnia corrected, her voice firm. Assist me in the hunt, and you may live to see another day. Connor chuckled. Generous. But if I'm going to help, we're doing this my way. That means planning, strategy, and no rushing in with a spear thinking you're invincible. Rilnia's pride bristled at his tone, but she held her tongue. The human's survival on Zartha was proof enough that he wasn't entirely foolish. If he could offer insight into the serth's behavior, it might be worth listening to him. Very well, she said finally. We work together. But understand this, human, I am the lead hunter. You follow my commands. Connor smirked. Sure, Captain. Whatever you say. The newly formed alliance moved through the jungle, their steps silent and deliberate. Rilnia led the way, her senses finely attuned to the environment, while Connor followed close behind, scanning their surroundings with a practiced eye. Despite her initial skepticism, Rilnia couldn't help but be impressed by the human's adaptability. He moved with a quiet confidence, his every action purposeful. Tell me, Rilnia said as they navigated a dense thicket, how did you survive here for so long? Your kind is not known for enduring such environments. Connor shrugged. A mix of desperation and stubbornness, I guess. When my ship crashed, I didn't have much of a choice. It was either figure out how to live here or die. And yet you managed, Rilnia said, a note of curiosity in her voice. That is unexpected. Connor glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. Humans have a saying, adapt or perish. We're good at figuring things out when the stakes are high. Rilnia considered this. The Nizari valued strength and cunning, but adaptability was not a trait they often emphasized. Yet here was a human who had turned adaptability into a survival skill, thriving in a place that would kill most beings within days. Do you think you can kill the serth? Rilnia asked abruptly. Connor hesitated, then shook his head. Honestly? Probably not. But I can help you track it, learn its patterns. If you're determined to face it, I'll make sure you have the best shot. Rilnia's lips curved into a faint smile. Good. Because failure is not an option. By the time they reached the river basin, the sun was beginning to set, casting the jungle in shades of gold and green. The air grew cooler, but the tension between predator and prey remained palpable. Rilnia crouched by the water's edge, studying a set of massive clawed footprints embedded in the mud. The trail is fresh, she said, her voice low. It passed through here recently. Connor knelt beside her, his sharp eyes scanning the tracks. Looks like it was heading west, toward the cliffs, probably retreating to its lair for the night. Rilnia nodded, her yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. Then we strike at dawn. It will be vulnerable in its lair. Connor frowned. Vulnerable? That thing is never vulnerable. If we're going to do this, we need a plan. The serth is smart. If it senses a trap, it'll turn the tables on us. Rilnia regarded him thoughtfully. She wasn't used to taking advice from others, especially not from a human. But Connor's observations were logical, and she couldn't afford to let pride blind her to the dangers ahead. Very well, she said. We'll plan tonight. As the jungle descended into darkness, the two unlikely allies set up a small, concealed camp. Connor started a controlled fire, using a mix of scavenged materials and his own ingenuity to ensure it wouldn't attract unwanted attention. Rilnia watched him closely, fascinated by his resourcefulness. You're more capable than I expected, she admitted as they sat by the fire. Connor smirked. Careful, Huntress. That almost sounded like a compliment. Rilnia's tail flicked in irritation, but she said nothing. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, laying out a holographic map of the area on her wrist projector. Together, they analyzed the serth's movements, identifying potential choke points and ambush sites. "It favors high ground," Connor said, tracing a route on the map. "If we can lure it to this ravine, it'll have fewer options to escape." "And how do you propose we lure it?" Rilnia asked. Connor grinned. "With bait. Big, loud, and irresistible bait." Rilnia's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting we use ourselves as bait." "Exactly," Connor said. "It'll take the risk if it thinks we're easy prey. But when it comes for us, we hit it with everything we've got." Rilnia considered the plan, her sharp mind weighing the risks and rewards. It was dangerous, reckless, even, but it had the potential to work. And if there was one thing she valued as much as strength, it was boldness. "Very well," she said. "We'll set the trap at dawn." As the fire burned low and the jungle came alive with nocturnal sounds, Rilnia found herself studying Connor more closely. He was unlike any human she had ever encountered, resourceful, intelligent, and unshakable in the face of danger. In Nizari culture, such traits were highly prized. Strength was not just physical. It was a combination of mind, body, and spirit. Perhaps this human was not so insignificant after all. Chapter 3. The Sereth Strikes. The faint light of dawn crept over the horizon, bathing the jungle in muted hues of amber and green. Zarthi awoke with a cacophony of sounds, predators stirring in their dens, prey creatures chirping nervously, and the ever-present rustle of the dense underbrush. For Rilnia Katrin and Connor Vance, the morning marked the beginning of their most dangerous endeavor yet. The duo crouched in the shadows of a narrow ravine, the chosen battleground for their trap. Rilnia's sleek black armor shimmered faintly as she adjusted the energy spear slung across her back, while Connor quietly checked his plasma pistol and the improvised traps they had scattered around the ravine. "Everything's in place," Connor whispered, his voice barely audible over the jungle's ambient noise. "If this works, we'll force it into the open. But remember, this thing isn't just dangerous because it's strong. It's smart." Rilnia's yellow eyes flickered with determination. "I have faced intelligent prey before, human. The Sereth will fall like all the others." Connor didn't respond immediately. He respected Rilnia's confidence, but he had seen what the Sereth could do. This creature was unlike anything either of them had faced, and underestimating it could get them both killed. Still, he couldn't deny the sense of awe he felt as he glanced at the towering Nizari Huntress. She moved with the grace of a predator and the precision of a seasoned warrior. In another life, he might have admired her from afar. Now, their lives depended on each other. The plan was simple in theory but fraught with risk. Using themselves as bait, they would lure the Sereth into the ravine, where the steep walls and strategically placed traps would limit its movements. Connor had set up sonic emitters at key points to create disorienting sound waves, while Rilnia's energy spear would deliver a killing blow once the creature was immobilized. But the Sereth was no ordinary predator. It was an apex hunter, a creature that had ruled Zartha for centuries. If their plan failed, there would be no second chance. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the jungle canopy, Rilnia raised her hand in a silent signal. Connor activated the sonic emitters, their shrill tones echoing through the ravine like the cry of wounded prey. The jungle fell silent, the other creatures instinctively sensing the presence of a far greater predator. Minutes passed in tense silence, the duo scanning the surrounding jungle for any sign of movement. Then, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the air, sending a shiver down Connor's spine. "It's coming," Rilnia whispered, her hand tightening around her spear. The Sereth emerged from the dense foliage like a living nightmare. It was massive, easily 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with a sleek, spiked hide that gleamed like polished obsidian. Its eyes glowed a deep crimson, intelligence burning behind their predatory gaze. The creature moved with unsettling grace, its powerful limbs carrying it effortlessly over the uneven terrain. Connor's breath caught as he took in the beast's sheer size. "That thing looks like it could eat a starship." Rilnia didn't respond. Her focus was entirely on the Sereth, Her muscles coiled like springs as she prepared for the confrontation. She had hunted many dangerous creatures in her life, but this was different. The serth wasn't just a beast, was her equal. The serth paused at the edge of the ravine, its head tilting as it analyzed the situation. It let out a low, rumbling growl, its sharp, curved claws digging into the earth. "It knows something's off," Connor murmured. "It's testing us." Rilnia's tail flicked in frustration. "Then we give it no time to think." Before Connor could protest, Rilnia leapt from her hiding place, her spear crackling with energy. She moved with blinding speed, her strike aimed directly at the sereth's vulnerable underbelly. The sereth reacted instantly, twisting its massive body with inhuman agility. Rilnia's spear struck its flank, the energy discharge sending a burst of light and heat through the air. The sereth roared in pain and anger, its crimson eyes locking onto the Nazari Huntress with lethal intent. "Fall back," Connor shouted, firing his plasma pistol to distract the creature. Rilnia darted back toward the ravine, the sereth in furious pursuit. The ground trembled beneath its weight, and its claws tore through the foliage as it closed the distance. Connor fired again, the plasma bolt striking the sereth's shoulder and scorching its hide. The beast barely flinched, its focus entirely on Rilnia. As she reached the center of the ravine, Rilnia activated the first trap. A net of high-tensile energy strands shot up from the ground, entangling the sereth's legs. The beast roared in fury, thrashing against the restraints. "Now!" Rilnia shouted. Connor activated the sonic emitters, the shrill tones disorienting the sereth. The beast stumbled, its movements erratic as it tried to regain its balance. But the sereth was not so easily defeated. With a furious bellow, it tore through the energy net, its claws slashing through the strands like paper. It turned its attention to the source of the sound, its crimson eyes locking onto Connor. "Oh, no," Connor muttered, backing away as the sereth charged. Rilnia moved like lightning, intercepting the beast with a powerful strike. Her spear pierced its shoulder, eliciting another ear-splitting roar. But the sereth was relentless, swiping at her with its massive claws. She narrowly avoided the attack, rolling to the side and coming to her feet in a fluid motion. "This thing doesn't quit," Connor shouted, firing another plasma bolt. The shot hit the sereth's flank, but it barely slowed down. Rilnia growled in frustration, her mind racing. The traps had weakened the sereth, but it was far from defeated. If they didn't find a way to immobilize it soon, the fight would end in their deaths. Connor's gaze darted to the ravine walls, an idea forming in his mind. "Rilnia, get it to charge me." "What?" she hissed, her eyes flashing with disbelief. "Trust me," Connor yelled, sprinting toward the far wall of the ravine. The sereth roared and lunged after him, its powerful legs propelling it forward. Connor reached the wall and turned just as the beast closed in. At the last second, he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its snapping jaws. The sereth's momentum carried it into the wall, and the unstable rock face collapsed in a shower of boulders. The beast let out a deafening roar as it was buried under the rubble, its massive form pinned beneath the weight. Rilnia approached cautiously, her spear at the ready. The sereth thrashed weakly, its strength waning as it struggled against the debris. "Now's your chance," Connor said, breathing heavily. Rilnia didn't hesitate. She plunged her spear into the sereth's exposed underbelly, the energy discharge searing through its body. The beast let out one final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing, its crimson eyes dimming as life left its massive frame. The jungle fell silent once more, the echoes of the battle fading into the distance. Rilnia stood over the sereth's body, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. Connor approached, his plasma pistol still in hand. "You did it," he said, a grin breaking across his face. "The great Nazari Huntress claims another victory." Rilnia turned to him, her yellow eyes gleaming with respect. "Not just me, human. We did it." Connor chuckled. "Does this mean I've earned a spot in your hunting party?" Rilnia tilted her head, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "You have proven yourself resourceful and bold. In Nazari culture, Such traits are highly valued. Her gaze lingered on him, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. A hunter like you deserves to pass on his genes. Connor blinked, caught off guard by the comment. Thanks? I think. Rilnia laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the ravine. For the first time since arriving on Zarthe, she felt a sense of connection, a bond forged through the shared struggle of the hunt. Perhaps this human was more than just an ally. Chapter 4. Legacy of the Hunt. The air in the ravine was still thick with the acrid tang of blood and sweat. The once mighty serth lay lifeless, its gleaming black hide now dulled in death. Its size and fearsome form seemed less terrifying now, but its presence still commanded respect. Connor Vance wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against a boulder, catching his breath. Rilnia Katrin stood tall beside the fallen beast, her energy spear still crackling faintly as she gazed at her prize. For a long moment, neither spoke. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the shift in balance. The apex predator had been dethroned. Connor broke the silence first, his voice dry. So, this is what victory feels like. Sweaty, terrifying, and a little like I might collapse any second. Rilnia turned to him, her yellow eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and newfound respect. You joke, human, but few could have done what you did. You faced the serth and lived. That alone is a feat worthy of legend. Connor smirked, shrugging. It wasn't exactly a solo act. You're the one who brought it down. Rilnia stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Perhaps. But your tactics, your ingenuity, and your courage ensured our success. The Nizari value such traits deeply. Connor raised an eyebrow. You've mentioned that a few times now. What exactly does that mean? Am I about to be recruited into some alien hunters guild? Rilnia tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. In Nizari culture, partnerships formed through battle are sacred. To fight alongside someone is to see their true essence. You have proven yourself worthy, Connor Vance. Connor scratched the back of his head, suddenly self-conscious. Thanks? I guess. As the initial adrenaline of the battle faded, practicality set in. The serth's carcass needed to be prepared and transported, a daunting task, even with Rilnia's strength and skill. Connor, ever the pragmatist, suggested they salvage what they could and leave the rest. This thing is massive, he said, gesturing to the beast's enormous frame. We'll never haul it back through the jungle in one piece. Take what you need to prove your victory, its head, claws, whatever, and let the jungle take care of the rest. Rilnia frowned, her pride resisting the suggestion. Among the Nizari, a huntress' success was judged by the size and condition of her trophy, but she also knew Connor was right. The serth's lair was still a dangerous place, and lingering too long could attract other predators. Very well, she said finally. We'll take the head and its largest claws. Those will suffice as proof. The task was gruesome but efficient. Rilnia's energy spear sliced through the serth's hide with ease, and Connor used a salvaged blade to extract the claws. By the time they finished, the jungle's oppressive heat had returned, and their bodies were slick with sweat. As they prepared to leave, Connor glanced back at the carcass, now partially shrouded in the creeping shadows of the ravine. It's almost a shame to leave it behind, he said. Something that powerful deserves more than to just rot in the jungle. Rilnia nodded, her expression solemn. Its strength will not be forgotten. In Nizari tradition, the tale of this hunt will be told for generations. Connor chuckled. Well, make sure to leave out the part where I almost got eaten. Rilnia's lips curved into a rare smile. I make no promises. The journey back to Rilnia's drop pod was arduous. The jungle seemed to sense the absence of its apex predator, and lesser creatures emerged from hiding, emboldened by the shift in power. Rilnia and Connor moved swiftly and cautiously, dispatching threats when necessary but avoiding unnecessary fights. Despite the weight of the serth's head and claws, Rilnia carried the burden without complaint, her immense strength a testament to her warrior training. Connor, meanwhile, found himself oddly at ease. For the first time in months, he wasn't alone. Rilnia's presence, though intimidating at first, had become a source of comfort. She was a formidable ally, and he couldn't help but admire her determination and resilience. "So," Connor said as they navigated a dense thicket, "what happens after this? You bring that thing's head back to your people, get a fancy title, and go on to hunt something even scarier?" Rilnia glanced at him, her expression contemplative. "That is the expectation. The title of Master Huntress would ensure my genes are preserved and enhanced for future generations. It is the highest honor among my people." Connor whistled. "No pressure or anything." Rilnia hesitated, then added, "But this hunt has changed my perspective." Connor raised an eyebrow. "Oh? How so?" She stopped, turning to face him. "Before I came to Zarthe, I believed strength alone defined a hunter's worth. But you have shown me that adaptability, ingenuity, and the ability to forge alliances are just as important. Perhaps there is more to the hunt than I realized." Connor scratched his chin. "Are you saying I've inspired a cultural revolution? Because I don't think I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." Rilnia smirked. "You may not be ready, but you are deserving." Connor blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the jungle's oppressive heat. When they finally reached Rilnia's drop pod, the sight was both a relief and a bittersweet reminder of what came next. The sleek, metallic vessel was a stark contrast to the untamed wilderness surrounding it. It represented safety, but also separation. "This is where we part ways," Rilnia said, setting the Sereth's head and claws carefully inside the pod. "I must return to my people." Connor nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment in his chest. "Makes sense. You've got a legacy to build." Rilnia stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. "And what of you, Connor Vance? Will you remain on Zarthe?" Connor laughed, shaking his head. "Not if I can help it. I've had enough near-death experiences to last a lifetime. Once I figure out how to contact a passing ship, I'm getting off this rock." Rilnia studied him for a long moment, her yellow eyes intense. "You are a remarkable being, human. Few could have survived what you endured, let alone aided me in such a dangerous hunt. If you ever find yourself among the stars, seek the Nizari. You will be welcomed." Connor smiled, his heart lifting despite the circumstances. "I'll hold you to that." Rilnia extended her hand, her sharp claws glinting in the sunlight. Connor hesitated, then grasped it firmly. Her grip was strong but not crushing, a gesture of mutual respect. "May your future hunts be worthy of your strength," Rilnia said, releasing his hand. "And may yours be a little less life-threatening," Connor replied. Rilnia laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the jungle. Then, with a final nod, she stepped into the drop pod. The hatch closed behind her, and moments later, the vessel ascended into the sky, leaving Connor alone once more. As the jungle returned to its relentless rhythm, Connor stood in the clearing, watching the drop pod disappear into the atmosphere. He felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a lingering sense of connection. He had faced death alongside Rilnia Katrin, and though their paths had diverged, he knew their bond would endure. With a sigh, he turned back toward his makeshift camp. He still had work to do, tools to repair, a signal to send, and maybe, just maybe, a future to plan. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment to rest, a quiet smile playing on his lips as he remembered Rilnia's parting words. A hunter like that deserves to pass on his genes.